I made $20,000 yesterday on my Bitcoin positions, which I'll show you just for proof. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm actually considering going off system, and that's why I made this video, just to document what's going on. So let me show you a couple of my accounts just so you know. Let's look. So I'm going to show you guys two accounts, and then we'll get to the charts. This is one of them. You can see it's holding $4,500 in Bitcoin profit on a little more than half a Bitcoin. And then the bigger trade, I'm going to find it right now, is holding $27,000 a Bitcoin on a little bit over $27,000 in profit on 2.3 Bitcoin. And I paid $886 in funding fees. And that's why I'm considering closing it, because of the funding fees. So now that that transparency is out of the way, my plan is I'm getting exposure from the trend following system, which I call MTP, and I'm getting exposure from the crypto bots. I'm getting that exposure through crypto perpetual futures, which has an expensive funding rate. That funding rate I don't want to pay year round. So it's been my strategy to not buy dips, to only buy breakouts. I want to limit my exposure to the most opportune times. I'm interested in the future in buying dips using spot. Now that my capital has increased significantly, I will buy dips using spot, but not perpetual futures because I don't want to be sitting and funding for a long time. So it's been my plan to de-risk my large position when funding spikes very high and to take that capital and put it into the bots. So I would still be getting Bitcoin exposure, but it would be different. Now, this, it is a discretionary overlay over a statistical evidence. It's not a full statistical model. So this isn't a full discretionary thing. I know that at market tops, there are extreme funding events where funding gets extremely overheated. Everyone wants to be long, especially when there's extreme moving average. And it's been my idea that when this happens, this is when I'm going to get out and move, right? So I know that the funding rate has edge and it tells us something about the market. So this is something that we're going to get into, and it's also something that's not available on the price chart. We can mark it up and say, oh, ETH should follow Bitcoin to new all-time highs, or we could say this daily fair value gap is going to be resistant. We could say a lot of different things. What I'm interested in is not on the price chart. It's not on the price chart. So, I mean, its prices just started to break out, but we got to look at the funding rate. Now, something that I'm going to say about Bitcoin is this kind of moves that we've seen before, I feel very confident saying it won't happen again. Why? Because the asset class is much bigger now and it's become an institutional asset. There will be bull markets and there will be bear markets, but it won't go up 10,000% and then down 90%. It's not going to happen anymore. So I'm caring a little bit less about analyzing the chart, and I'm caring a little bit more about analyzing the funding. So one thing I want to point out is we had a failed breakout of an all-time high, went parabolic, failed at the all-time high, pulled back. When we broke out from that previous all-time high, we only rallied about 50% and we pulled back almost all the way to the breakout point. So this doesn't need to run hundreds of percent. I'd love it if it runs 50% and I'm holding it, but it doesn't have to. So we are going to look at the charts a little bit, but I'm going to get into the funding rate and we'll take a look. So I just want to look at a couple things. Solana doesn't look very strong. ETH looks quite strong. I don't have that many shortlisted BNB. Let's try to edit this. Levels and gaps. Weekly highs. I just want monthly level. ADA. I mean, a lot of them hit these major levels and then are pulling back. It doesn't mean it needs to reverse the entire way, but um, yeah, I wouldn't want to short here. I would say that. Let's look at the Bitcoin. Obviously, ETH BTC has been a little bit strong. Bitcoin dominance. Nothing too crazy. It hasn't been so much of an alt rally, but it's been a little bit. But you see, on one hand, oh, the crypto market has barely moved. It could go significantly higher. I agree with you. It is July, which makes the odds a little bit stacked against us. It's also, right now it's a doji at this old monthly high, which it's not really great, but doesn't necessarily matter. Just first reaction. Now let's get to the data that we really care about, which is I want to read the position of the market because again, I have a plan and so far the data that we've looked at doesn't tell us anything about it. Okay, so let's look at liquidations, 24 hours. Actually, it's been balanced in the past 24 hours, but there was $1 billion of liquidations that happened the day before. It's been relatively balanced. I mean, in the last 4 hours, actually, it's longs that, and even on the 12 hours, actually more longs are getting stopped out than shorts. Okay, so let's do a basic look at the market right now. So somebody's big short on Vertex. We can see that the market is hot. However, let's zoom out. So the green is the funding rate, right? So I'm looking for, I'm going to give you some examples. We had extreme funding on this day, January 19th. Where is it? January 19th, which like ended up marking the top perfectly. And then we had similar funding actually on the Bybit. I don't know why people went long when Bybit was hacked, but on February 21, this was the Bybit hack. So these are marking the tops. You can also see that there was another elevated funding event on May 21. It looks like on May 21, which was on this day before we had a pullback, which this was a scary pullback, guys. For me to be in such a big position, this was like a $30,000 or more equity swing. So there's not so much data on this chart. It only goes back about 6 months, but this is something that I've watched for years. Where are we right now? Funding has spiked, but it's at a level that it's been at many times. So I would look at this and say, is this a funding top? No, it's not a funding top. So I do not plan on closing for that reason. Now let's look at ETH. Let's look at some of the other ones. ETH, maybe. It's relatively at the highest point it's been, actually. So we need to look at the whole market. That's what I have the other website for. But I'm just going to go through one by one. Solana, nothing too crazy yet. Honestly, I mean, I think Bitcoin is the biggest one, but looking at the global market is helpful. XRP is at the highest level. So, I mean, it's almost kind of toppy. It might not get there. We might not have the insanity. We might though. Um, okay, let's look at it here. So let's look at the funding rate. Okay, I've got the funding rate, predicted funding rate. Um, this one isn't the global. The global is important because it tells us the whole market. So I'm gonna come in here and brighten it so it's easier to see. And I like this one because it gives us more price history. There's nothing, this is the best data source that I've found for this compared to any kind of trading view indicator. So I like having an obscure data source, right? So here we can see these are all the data sources that are taken together. Binance, Huobi, BlueX, BitMEX, Hyperliquid. Doesn't have BitGet, but it has a lot of things. Okay, so to me, it does not look like a top, right? So if we're to zoom out, let's put it on the weekly actually. So one thing I'll say is if we look back to these extreme readings here, this will never happen again, or is unlikely to. And the reason why is because as an institutional assets, institutions now trade Bitcoin on the short side as an arbitrage trade. So, sorry, not as a yield trade. They buy spot Bitcoin and they sell perpetual futures, and it's a market neutral trade, and it suppresses the funding rate. So, like if the funding rate is this high, someone's going to come in and sell it just to collect that yield. We see red tends to mark bottoms. This is very statistically significant. Red tends to mark bottoms. Get over here. It did go red right here. And then this red has almost been like marking a bottom. It is not elevated at all. I mean, I would be looking for a spike like this to want to get out. Or even up here, but it just hasn't done it. And according to this, the global has been super negative and just finally went positive, right? I want to see something like this happen. So to me, I'm looking at this and I'm like, stick to my plan and, and not close. Look at the monthly too, is interesting. Spikes at the tops, red or flat at the bottoms. It hasn't spiked yet. So it's not 100% though. I mean, funding wasn't very high up here before it had a nasty drawdown. So, but that said, if I'm to look at the funding right now, I'm paying 0.01%, which isn't that bad, right? 0.01% equals out to 10% on the yearly. So if that number is like 30%, 50%, that's when I would want to close just for funding. But hope you found something useful for this. Do I want to automate this? Make strategy based on off it? Somehow, yes.